All right, thanks everybody for making it to today's meeting. First order of business is to approve the July 21st meeting minutes. Just a motion.
So moved.
Second. Excellent, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that's approved.
Yes, we don't have anyone online, but we do have someone in attendance. We have Kristen from Central Oregon Land Watch. And just to tee this up a little bit, hopefully you guys were able to take a look at that email I sent earlier this morning. But Kristen and I have been in discussions around this concept around neighborhood commercial and our codes and standards and a potential proposal for consideration that she would like to present. So we have a timer here just for your reference.
Perfect, thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Reidelberger, and I'm the Associate Program Manager for the Cities and Towns program at Central Oregon Land Watch. As I shared in my emailed public comment, Land Watches and Ben Diemby are partnering in an effort to create more flexibility for neighborhood commercial development to occur in Bend. People love the ease of walking to their nearby cafe or corner store, popping into local artisan shops, and being able to meet basic needs in their neighborhoods. Some West Side neighborhoods are highly desirable because they offer this walkability and access to jobs, services, and amenities. But much of the rest of the city lacks a sense of place and community that is fostered by neighborhood scale commercial uses. Currently, neighborhood commercial is allowed within the residential code. Examples include Active Culture, Jackson's Corner, and Bruno's Market. But the code is limited and rarely used. The city hasn't seen any neighborhood commercial developments in nearly 20 years. In 2019, some minor adjustments were made to the code with the intention of adding more flexibility and encouraging more utilization of the code. However, 5 years later, we still have not seen any neighborhood commercial development. We believe this code is due for a review. Our recommended amendments are focused on broadening siting standards, permitted and conditional uses, and building types to include live-work units and accessory commercial units. We're also interested in the possibility of creating incentives or pilot programs to encourage the use of the code. We've seen a significant number of property owners take advantage of middle housing code changes, and expanding this concept to missing middle commercial could have a similar effect, especially in a city like Bend, where small businesses account for 79% of all business establishments. During a time of rising business costs, remote and hybrid work, and a competitive commercial real estate market, having more options for small neighborhood operations could help support small business incubation and the weathering of today's macroeconomic challenges. We'd like to bring this concept to City Council for consideration, and as an advisory body to Council and as representatives of the business community, BDAB's insights and feedback on this topic would be greatly valued. Therefore, we would like to request the opportunity to present this topic more thoroughly at the September 8th BDAB meeting. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen. We can briefly discuss that topic if you'd like to.
Well, generally, I don't believe in commenting on public comment, but I think this one is definitely worthy. So would the request to our board be that one of us ask you to put this on the agenda?
That would be next step. Yeah, if we would like it to be an actual agenda item on the September 8th meeting, then that would need to come from the board to be recommended.
Yeah.
Second. Yeah, the motion.
Yeah.
Agreement is a motion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to do a motion just to gauge
I think so,
the
too.
appetite.
I think it's worth the discussion.
So we have a motion and a second. Okay. All in favor of putting this on the September agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Perfect. Thank you, Kristen. Great. Next on the agenda, I thought it would be helpful to just spend a few moments orientating everyone with one another since we have some new board members and this is their first meeting. Maybe we'll start online. We have Dwayne Judd online, we have Dwayne Judd, Amy Bertram, and Willie Hertford. Willie and Amy are alternates, so they're not technically sitting on the board, but in the situation in which we have a board member step down or things happen, we have alternates already in place to fill those seats. So they're joining us online today. Maybe we could start with the folks in person and then we'll transition to the folks online, but just maybe your name, your organization that you're representing, and then what brought you to BDAB in terms of interests or passion. Maybe our chair should kick us off.
Gary North, I own a small business in town called Cruzy and have been involved in BDAP for a few years. I guess it was sort of accidental getting on here, but just some previous involvement on other boards and interactions with the city got me here, and I'm happy to be here and happy to be a part of helping with community engagement and other things. So
I am Brianna Manfres, president of Pinnacle Architecture here in town. And I've been on BDAP this is my second term, so it's a little over 5 years. It feels longer, or sounds longer than it feels. And I mostly was interested just in being more engaged in our local community. This is all of state Oregon, so presence here on things that are happening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jillian Taylor, and my business is Jillian Taylor Consulting. I work with a lot of different businesses locally and other communities, primarily on business strategy and executive coaching. So, and I joined BDAB because I had just come off the Bend Vision Project, and with my work, I just have had the opportunity to work with a lot of different groups and represent a pretty diverse perspective.
I'm Chad Schlotman. I'm a project executive with Skanska. We're a commercial contractor in town. And so I've been with Skanska for over 19 years. Moved in Central Oregon roughly around 2010. Had opportunities to work in and around the state, and then be able to call this my home. But I'm very just excited to be a part of the board and help economic development within our community and in Central Oregon. And I'm hoping my commercial background, the construction side, that I can bring some value to the group and to the.
Hi there, my name is Jen Lynch and I have been on BDAB, I think, for a year. I am a partner at Portland Seed Fund, which is an early stage and pre-seed venture capital fund. And I am here because I do my other economic development volunteering is I lead the Oregon Innovation Council, which is a statewide economic development exercise about innovation-based and R&D-based businesses. And I'm excited to be able to bring that perspective to localize that here. And Bend, I also do some volunteering with EDCO, working with venture-backed startups in Central Oregon and beyond. And I think I probably just touch a different cluster of business than a lot of the folks at the table.
Right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is John Evans. This is my first meeting with BDAB, and I'm CEO of a company in town called Angle, a software company servicing the retail and kind of branded manufacturing space. And prior to starting Angle, I was president of Keen Footwear in Portland, Oregon, was with Keen for about 10 years, spent about 15 years in the outdoor industry with Columbia Sportswear and a few other brands along the way. And I'm actually a boomerang to Bend. I lived in Bend as a kid and unfortunately moved away when I was about 12 years old to move to South Bend, Indiana, which is nowhere near as great of a place as Bend, Oregon. And so very excited to be back in what feels like home and raising my kids here as well. So good to be here.
Hi there, I'm Mark Cronky. I've been on the board a couple of years now. I have a company that I'm managing partner for, Invoke Technologies. We do work with public transit agencies, Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And my specialty is equity. And so I try to bring an equity stance to everything I do and look at here on the board. I'm also involved with a lot. I mean, all my stuff is on public. Hey, Dwayne. All my stuff is public facing with local governments. And so I understand the rules and regulations and things around around these kinds of meetings, and so I try to bring that as well.
Apologies for being late. There was an accident on
You're right.
97. They had me stuck to my back of red. My name is Dwayne Judd. I own the property and the business of Mirror Pond Dry Cleaners next door. Bought that in September 2024. From Baltimore originally, spent the last 10, 15 years also in Portland, competing with Kane, working for Columbia Sportswear. And when I came to Bend, Cyrus was one of the first people I met, and he's an aggressive recruiter. And looking to sort of engage with the community and use my experiences to benefit the community. He told me not to join the budget committee, but join this one because it was a lot more fun. So that's what I've done.
Great. And online we have Willie and Amy. Willie, if you want to unmute and give a brief introduction, that would be great.
You bet. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Willie Hertford. I'm president of Miller Lumber. You all may know about the Miller family. This lumber yard's been around for whatever, 114 years, but so I'm trying to carry on the legacy. I'm excited to be here in Bend and be involved in the community. And this looked like a great opportunity in which I could contribute. And so I look forward to the opportunity. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Willie. Amy, if you want to do the same.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Bertram. I am a product manager working remotely in technology. I work for S&P Global, which is a large global financial services company, and I work on their market intelligence software. Prior to moving to Bend a few years ago, I used to live in Southern California, where I did a short stint as a small business owner and faced a series of challenges, especially in Southern California. So I'm really looking forward to contributing. I think Bend is a fantastic incubator for small businesses and the growth of those businesses. So I look forward to, observing for now and seeing how I can contribute to our growing economy.
Thanks so much, Amy. We really appreciate you and Willie both being here.
Sure.
Last introduction I want to do is just internally. We have hired our development navigator position. So Erica Jensen was going to come up and do a brief intro just so you guys can get acquainted with that position. I know there's been a lot of talk about it and I think a lot of excitement. So now we get to put a face to the name. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Erica. I'm the new development navigator for the city. I'm in my 3rd week, so just getting my feet under me, learning internal processes, but I'm excited to work with all of you. And I've been in Bend for about 2 years, so not new to Bend, which is great.
Thank you, Erica. I think the intent with Erica's position is really to be a first point of contact, but also a consistent point of contact for the development process from start to finish, particularly with some of our bigger or more complex projects. Just having someone that's not a regulator, that's not, in a designated space throughout the process, but can see it from start to finish. So we're really excited about having that new capacity and position to be able to do that. But I thought it would be helpful for you guys to just know that she's here and ready to be a resource. So also I want to acknowledge we have a number of ex officio seats on BDAB. We have Visit Bend, we have the Bend Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development for Central Oregon, East Cascades Works, which is a workforce development agency regionally, and COCC and the Small Business Development Center also have a seat that's represented. But for the sake of time, I think we should keep moving on. But just want to acknowledge that it's a very collaborative effort on BDAB.
Okay. Council liaison report.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new members. Happy summer. I have to say, I'm glad it's ending. My kids are at like peak feral right now. Anyways, At first I wanted to start, but to apologize, if the bulletin is listening, I apologize because I think it was last time I was here, I said that and at that time, we were going to be having our work sessions on the Monday before our council meetings. That has changed, so I wanted to give you the update. The bulletin said, she said it was going to be on Monday. But our business meetings are now on the as of September, will be on the first and third Wednesdays. That has not changed. They will start at 6, not at 7. And our work sessions are going to be on the second and the fourth Wednesday of the month. And those will be from 4 to 6. So every Wednesday there will be a meeting. But I think we're all happier about the schedule. I think it'll allow us to, like I said earlier, be fresher and be able to just sort of absorb the information better. So this next meeting on Wednesday in a couple of days is the last combo meeting. It starts at 5:30. And I want to let you know, we are going to start the meeting with a read and bond roundabout discussion. That's been a very hot topic recently, and we're going to sort of be looking into whether it's something that we want to prioritize moving up as far as the schedule goes or not. And that discussion will then, the results of that discussion will lead us into the bigger discussion, which will be on October 8th, which is when we really have our priorities discussion about all of our transportation projects. So the other thing that's going to impact that October 8th priorities discussion is we are going to be doing the Midtown Crossings discussion on September 24th. And that is looking at the three projects as a whole, looking at Hawthorne and Franklin and the data from Greenwood, and really trying to understand and talk about how what we want to prioritize when with limited money. If you are interested in participating in that discussion, we would love to hear from you. So that will be on the work session. We'll continue to not have public comment, but the council meetings will have public comment. So that will be September 24th, just to get that on your radar. On Wednesday, we are going to be receiving an update. This is not a discussion. There won't be any direction, but an update on electrification and the fee and how that could or could not work, some of the challenges that we might see in the community. And then that larger conversation is going to be in late October. And I think the 22nd is what we done. So just wanted to get that on your radar as well. September 10th at our work session, we're going to be talking about parking districts. I know there's been some information in the news lately about that, particularly on Galveston and other areas. And we will be having the transportation fee discussion on the 10th. I'm assuming that's because of the legislative transportation special session, right, Russ? That's happening on the 29th. So whatever happens on the 29th will definitely, that's why we're having that conversation, to see what the results of that are. And then just one more thing to flag for you, and then I'll take any questions or thoughts or whatever, is Welcoming Week is coming up for the city of Bend. We've been celebrating that for years and years. It's a really important community event, and it's more than a week, but we call it Welcoming Week. It's September 12th through the 21st. So just keep an eye out for some really, really great events that will be in all over our community.
And I think on that note, if there are
Yes.
any events during Welcoming Week that you think are specifically pertaining to
Yeah.
the business community
Yeah.
where it might
Absolutely.
be the best for us to participate,
Yes.
please.
Yes.
You can share with me and I can share with the board. Or
I will do
whatever
that.
sees
I will
fit.
do that. I'll make a little note. And if I'm happy to answer any questions or
I'm curious whether the council's taking up specific things like the read and bond roundabout.
why.
Yeah.
A lot of it is hearing from the community. We had a significant amount of people in the community talk to us, particularly, I mean, as you know, obviously anyone who's had to sit there understands it's congestion city, but also as it relates to their word about fire and how to evacuate should something like that happen. A lot of the neighborhoods around there too are getting a lot of cut through traffic, which is, they feel really dangerous. And so this is something that we've been sort of talking about for a while now, but with a lot of the community sort of input that we received lately, we just kind of want to look into it again and see if there's a way. And it keeps sort of getting a little bit farther down the list. I think for anyone who does drive that during rush hour, this is my personal view, but like that's a rough one to sit there for as long as you have to sit there.
But at a high level, it's really about priority discussions, right?
Yeah,
That's what you're saying.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
It's not taking on individual projects and trying.
No. This was on the
We're
list.
just talking priorities.
Yeah, we're not adding anything to the list. We are simply just having it because Russ would keel over if we did. But we are simply just trying to decide like what we need to prioritize, with obviously with limited funding
So it's not,
resources.
just to be clear, it's not necessarily about this one project. It's about where this one project fits in.
Yes,
And that
yes.
may affect another project that then bounces down,
Exactly.
that causes some others.
Exactly.
Got it.
You said it better.
I don't know if this is for you or for Cyrus, but when council gets feedback about these midtown crossing options, do you get something that looks like, here's what business owners say, and here's what commuters say, and here's what
No.
safety says? No, okay. You just
And I would love
highlight
that.
safety.
I would love that because we often just get, the people that show up in the room that day,
Yeah.
or the email.
Like that one's been online, right? So
Greenwood has been online. We are going to receive the sort of the results of the data, because last time it was, we hadn't reopened that one intersection. And so there was a lot of other things. So we wanted to get sort of the full data. But I think again, this is my view, not council's. I would be very interested in hearing from particularly people who have to commute every day, and the businesses that are along those corridors, what they would like to see with Midtown crossings, not just on Greenwood, but also on Franklin. Because what we're talking about Franklin, we're talking about a lot of money, and we're talking about a closure that would have to happen if we do, the actual Midtown section of Franklin. And I know that we all have a lot of angst about and exhaustion about some of the road projects that have been going on in our community that are necessary road projects and projects that, are in the bond, or projects that have been on the list for years and years. But it's something that as a community, I would really like to hear from people who could address that.
The Greenwood survey is still open. If businesses want to provide feedback, that'd be the
Yeah.
best way to do it. Because
when they do it, there's a way to be like, I'm a business. I know he's putting it in all of his emails.
Yeah, I would definitely in the comments say that they are.
Also the owner of.
Yes,
Let us know
that
in
would
the
be,
comments.
yes. But, and any additional emails separate from that data are also helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of variability, even depending on the businesses, so we really rely on partners like the chamber to speak more representatively of the business community for advocacy related items, but yeah, I think there's a lot of ways we try to incorporate feedback to the best of our ability. On the transportation topic, Russ wanted to make sure that it's mentioned that the transportation fee bills have started to hit people's boxes. So if you hear about people being confused or not knowing why the increase was there, you can feel free to point them our direction, but they'll start seeing those probably early this week.
They should start, yeah. If you get it electronically, you probably already have it, then mails start showing up early this week.
Thank you.
Jonathan. Best bandit.
Right, before we jump into the presentation, just a brief update on where we're at with the stakeholder interviews. You recall our original target was to get 100 done. Currently we have around 40 done. By the end of next week, we should have closer to 60. So we're making some good headway. They have been extremely valuable, I think, just for me personally, to go out and visit with so many different people and try to get all of these varying perspectives incorporated into the feedback that's going to help guide this plan. But just wanted to make sure that you knew we're hitting the streets as hard as we can. I think between the stakeholder interviews, focus groups, other community engagement opportunities, will hit well beyond that 100 mark. I don't know if we'll hit 100 specifically for the stakeholder interviews, but we should be darn close. So just wanted to let you know that we've done that, and we will summarize all of that data with specifically for the stakeholder interviews and bring that to BDAP probably in October for your review. But that's that. We'll pass it over to John.
Yes, so good evening or good afternoon. My name is Jonathan. I am the Urban Renewal Manager for the City of Bend. So earlier in the framework, we presented you that we are going to be doing 3 massive documents, a part of the Invest Bend campaign. One was the industry cluster analysis and labor analysis, which was sent to you as a draft form on Friday, I think. State of the housing, which was supposed to be released last Friday, but it's going through some more internal review. It will be released this Friday, and the state of the economy will also be released. So we're releasing all 3 documents this week. This will put us now 1 month ahead of schedule because we've decided to do all 3 documents at one time because we got the in-plan and light cast systems. The difference between what you saw last year and earlier this spring between the target sector and this one is this one uses 6-digit NACES codes and the target sector used 2-digit NACES codes. So we further refined the supply chain and labor analysis within each of those as a starting point, and then we're going to present what our findings are today. So the City of Bend conducted this analysis to identify correlated firms that possess a competitive regional advantage. And for us, regional would be not only City of Bend, but in your report, you saw that it's zip codes 97701, 02, and 03 because we are a regional workshed. This also used pre-established cluster definitions from the U.S. Cluster Mapping Project, which is one of the leading frontiers of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Harvard University. So it's identified already through the 6-digit NACES codes. And then it looked at both local sector and traded sector clusters. So what is a cluster? It's an establishment of identified networks that can possess a regional advantage that primarily export those services out. So there are 2 types of clusters. There are traded and local, and this may be redundant to some of you, but for those that may not know, a traded sector cluster is concentrated in a specific area that exports its goods and services because it's already meeting its local need. Local sector is those that primarily service the local population. So in economic development, we should be primarily focused on those traded sector clusters because if we use the resources that are limited and staffing that is limited both on capacity and resources, the dollar invested to bring in new dollars will result in a multiplier effect. So in the report, we did 3 base screening criteria. We used the location quotient greater than 1.10. It's higher than the standard analysis, which is 1, because we wanted to kind of eliminate some of the standard deviation between what might or might not be a local sector cluster. A differential shift, which is a competitive advantage. This possesses a cluster may grow faster than the national average or decline less rapidly than the national average. That means it still has a competitive advantage. And then clusters with 5 or more establishments. And the reason we picked 5 is because any cluster has to have critical concentration for them to be competitive both locally and nationally. This is a breakdown of the quadrant analysis. So you have 4 quadrants. You have the emerging, which is those clusters that probably with enough nurturing and or support will become a regionally competitive cluster that exports its goods and services. But right now they're probably still servicing the local economy. A growing cluster or the growing clusters are those that are the base or the star clusters of the region, which means they both employ and also export most of their goods and services outside the region. A mature cluster means that it's growing or declining less rapidly or less fast than the national average, but it still possesses a location quotient greater than 1. And then a transforming, that's those that are declining, probably going away, or at least kind of reinventing themselves in the overall grand scheme of things. So we started with 19 clusters. This is a lot. It took us took me a long time with the Excel spreadsheets, but we looked at everything from aerospace, business services, hospitality, and tourism. Now, I want to clarify the hospitality and tourism. There are two types of clusters in this one. One is a local-based hospitality sector, and the other one is traded. We only focused on the traded sector. Knowledge, information technology, biotech, biopharmaceutical, food and beverage, forestry, wood products, basically every traded sector cluster that might be present in the City of Bend. So we did the analysis based on those 3 screening criteria. Some had to fall off because they didn't have 5 or more establishments, but the rest are here. We'll go to the next one. So this analysis has identified 10 potential industry clusters in Bend with strong concentration and or strong employment growth. So basically the growing and or emerging clusters. Many of these clusters are well known in the area, such as food and beverage, manufacturing, forestry and wood products, and tourism. Taken together, these clusters employ 17% of the total workforce and pay an average annual salary ranging from $43,000 to $131,000. Most of these industries within these identified clusters export all or most of their products and services out of the region. And so the next slide will have the 10 top candidate clusters. So we have forestry and wood products, biotech, information technology, outdoor products, furniture, and hospitality and tourism as our growing base or star clusters. Our emerging clusters are the creatives. We combine 3 of those clusters together. That's the marketing design, the creative aspect, video production, performing arts, and music. Business services, knowledge, that's the higher education that brings in students. And then a maturing cluster, which is food and beverage, and we'll get into that in a second. So in addition to doing the screening criteria, we also wanted to know how strong these clusters are in terms of the competitive advantage that we have in the city of Bend. So we looked at basic employment, projected employment, and wage growth and competitiveness. Basic employment refers to those jobs that are dedicated specifically to producing goods and services that export those products or services outside the region. Projected employment, what is the employment by 2035 that's going to be within these particular industry clusters, and then the wage growth and competitiveness. So basically jobs that have industry wages and wage growth that exceed the national average provide better opportunities for job retention and industry recruitment. One of the key comments from one of our focus group attendees in session 2 was they are having a hard time retaining and or attracting employees because of the cost of living and or the lack of competitive wages. So the first is basic jobs. The largest industry cluster that had the most basic jobs was information technology at 570. This was followed by forest and wood products at 556. Outdoor products and furniture had the lowest basic jobs at 142 and 112. The other 3, which was the creatives, business services, and knowledge, are a growing emerging cluster, so they don't really have basic jobs that use their services to export out. So these are the top 7 for basic jobs. The projected employment. Most of the 10 industry clusters, 7 out of 10, are projected to have employment growth over the next 10 years. Business services, which will become almost a competitive cluster, but still will be below the 1.0 location quotient. But tourism, information technology, food and beverage, biotech are going to be the largest industry cluster with the projected employment growth. However, we all kind of know this, but furniture, outdoor products, and forestry and wood products are going to see a declining projected employment due to some of the various trade policies, due to the various national actions of the administration, and also just demand for more sustainable products. The overall wage competitiveness, it is no surprise that most of our wages are not competitive in the city of Bend. This is also true in our targeted industry clusters. So we looked at both the wage growth from 2019 to 2023, but then also the projected wage growth that we expect to see between 2023 and 2035. And then we also compared that to the overall wages of the US. And so the top 2 are furniture and business services. They have the most overall wage competitiveness, but if you look at the wages, 55,000, that is below the 72,000 threshold to afford an apartment, and then way below the $178,000 in order to afford a home on a single family income. And then business services, which is a little bit better, but that's $109,000. Forestry, outdoor, creatives, information, biotech, food and beverage, tourism, and knowledge do not have competitive wages. So that being said, we've identified 4 primary industry clusters. We've grouped a couple together to make it easier, not only on staff, but also the public to understand what we're trying to accomplish.
advanced sciences and manufacturing, outdoor lifestyle and products, craft beverages, and forestry and wood products. So in the advanced sciences and manufacturing, you have both the biotech industry and the information technology industry. The biotech cluster or subcluster accounts for 1.5% of Ben's gross domestic product at $156 million. This industry cluster is anchored by research and development, which is those in biosciences. This employs 66% of the total industry cluster workforce and accounts for 68% of the cluster's contribution to the overall economic impact of that cluster. The biotech industry sells 57% of its products and services outside the Bend area, and actually 53% of the industry's demand, which is what they bring in order to produce their product, is met by local suppliers. The average education and skills needed to be employed in this industry cluster is a bachelor's degree with limited to no work experience. And there are local educational institutions that have the capacity to provide for these education skills and support. In addition to the biotech information technology, this accounts for $475 million of the GDP. This industry or sub-industry cluster is anchored by software publishers, which employs 36% of the total industry cluster. And when I say industry cluster, we're talking about the subclusters right now. The industry cluster sells 63% of its products and services outside the Bend area, and 77% of the industry's demand is met by local suppliers. There are local educational institutions that have the capacity to provide the education skills required for this cluster. We have combined two subclusters into the outdoor lifestyle and products, both the hospitality and tourism cluster and the recreation goods or outdoor products. The hospitality and tourism subcluster accounts for 2% of Ben's gross domestic product and generates $239 million. This industry cluster is anchored by hotels and motels, which employs 64% of the total subcluster's employment and accounts for 69% of the overall hospitality impact. The industry cluster sells 71% of its products and services outside the Bend area, but only 44% of the industry's product is met by local suppliers. An economic survey of anchor amenities that support the hospitality and tourism subcluster are those located in the outdoor environment: Mount Bachelor Ski Resort, the Deschutes River, Hayden Homes Amphitheater, High Desert Museum, and Smith Rock, to name a few. The average education and skills level needed to be employed in this cluster is a high school diploma or less with limited on-the-job training. And there are local education institutions that have capacity to provide for this. In addition to the outdoor products, which is actually termed recreational goods, accounts for less than 1% of the gross domestic product at $38 million. But this industry cluster is anchored by travel, trailer, and camping manufacturing, which employs 36% of the total subcluster's employment and 19% of the subcluster's economic impact. The cluster sells 77% of its products and services outside the Bend area, but 44% of that is met by local suppliers. The next one is craft beverages and manufacturing. So we looked at the entire food and beverage manufacturing cluster and found that breweries, coffee, kombucha, and distilleries and wineries are the actual anchor of the food and beverage cluster. So therefore, we're going to call it craft beverages. This industry employs 75% of its total cluster and accounts for 74% of the overall economic impact of the cluster. The cluster sells 82% of its products and services outside the Bend area, but only 24% of that industry's demand is met by local suppliers. But that's not surprising because aluminum, steel, hops, stuff like that are not grown here or produced here. The average education skills needed to be employed in this cluster is a high school diploma or less with short and moderate term on-the-job training. There are local educational institutions that have the capacity to provide this knowledge. And lastly is the forestry and wood products. This has 3 subclusters in it: forestry, wood products, and wood furniture manufacturing. This accounts for 41% of the total industries cluster and only accounts for 1% of the overall economic impact. The firm with the largest economic contribution to this cluster is the wood, window, and door manufacturing. The industry cluster sells 63% of its products outside of Bend, with 57% of the industry's demand met by local suppliers. The data that was used in this industry cluster analysis was data from the Oregon Employment Department, Lightcast, and InPlan economic modeling softwares.
Question. Is the wood for a product, as an example, made up of multiple companies, or is it primarily driven by like a gel wood or something? And similarly, what does that look like across the other?
Yeah. I mean, let me scroll down to it. So if you look between, if you still have your stuff in front of you, but page 33 and onward in the industry cluster, we actually identify the NACES codes. So when Cyrus signed we cannot point out what firms within the industry clusters, but we can point out the NACES code and the total employment within each of those specific sub firms. We can tell you what firms are in these industry clusters. We just can't tell you who they employ, how many they employ, the average wage that they produce. But the forestry and wood products has over 33 sub firms, and the largest firm for forestry is Timber Track Operations, which we kind of expected with Deschutes National Forest and Timber Track Operations, both logging and/or preservation and maintenance. But then followed up by that is the window, wood and door manufacturing and millwork.
Yes, my curiosity is more, how would we be affected if like the top one in each one of those goes away?
Yeah, so we can actually run scenarios with that now because the light cast and implant, we can actually do economic modeling based on not only the expenditures done by a sub firm and or a cluster, but also what happens if a business closes or lays off 30 individuals. So we have that ability to kind of forecast. In those two economic modeling softwares, Implan is a year behind. So that's the only catch about Implan, and Lightcast uses their own like formulaic projections for 2024, but they use the same data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, RCSIS, OED, and all that stuff. So we're pretty confident with those numbers, but if we can always do hypotheticals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you just one more time on the employment? These are, the numbers are people who are employed at a Bend-based business in
Yes.
the cluster?
Yep.
So the work from home people are not in this chart at all?
Correct.
Okay.
If they have like hybrid situations or things like that, then we can't account for that, but the strictly remote workforce, we can.
Isn't it captured?
Unless their headquarters are in the city of Bend.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cyrus, maybe you and Jonathan can remind us of the roadmap here. There's, as always, Jonathan, you presented a ton of great data. It's
always the ton, right?
But I want to circle back to, especially since we have some new folks last year, or it wasn't last year, I'm losing track of time. We heard a consultant come and talk to us about this, and I'd say at 100,000 feet, their thoughts were, if we're going to have home prices like we are, which we are, we need to attract higher earning people. And we had discussions on how that's done. And then we said we were going to need to see the data to really figure that out. I assume this is heading us on that road. Is that where we are? And now we've got 3 documents coming, and maybe just give us how this all works together.
I think in our efforts to create something as comprehensive as we are, the multiple data sources we felt was pertinent to make sure that BDAP had an opportunity to review, but also to recommend. I think the kind of sentiment that we heard in the target sector analysis was that because of Ben's characteristics, having a blend of locally serving and export oriented sectors be included is important, because we understand not every occupation is going to be able to provide 90% AMI or more, but a lot of people move here and move their businesses here because of the amenities that the community provides. So it's a hard thing to thread the needle with, but we think that that is a sustainable path for our future. And so when we're looking at a 10-year document like we're trying to create, having that level of specificity within each of the reports, we think is critical.
But this would be justification of why we head down a certain path.
Correct. And if these industry clusters are the ones that we specifically call out in the actual strategy itself, having the data and recommendation from this board to justify that is what we're aiming to achieve.
So yeah, to build on Cyrus's point, the 3 documents will lead to the overall 10-year objective creation, but it also is to help provide key policy stakeholders and council the opportunity to come up with their own ideas. And those three documents, the state of the housing, state of the economy, and industry clusters, sometimes staff is looking at it, and I'll be honest, from a purely data-oriented view. And then those that are out there on Main Street might see a correlation between paragraph 1 of 1, 2, and 3, and you come up with your own policies and you take them to council. So the goal is to create the narrative, and we all know the narrative, but to have factual, data-relevant sources to back up that narrative, but then also to allow policy development in the future.
So, along with the policy development, one of the things that we talked about in terms of the data last time, that presentation was probably in January, February, is one of my first meetings. We talked about having something that's still a bit forward-leaning, like being able to be a little bit more predictive. And we understandably we're still not there yet, because this is great data, and really appreciate it. And you mentioned earlier about the sort of multiplier effect. Well, it'd be important, I think, to have a picture of what is the current snapshot of how those traded sectors are working with those local sectors, and seeing how the dollars are circulating in the community to really understand where there are gaps and where there's opportunities. We've had this in conversations with EDCO, and even some of the focus groups we've had already with Invest In, this conversation around whales or large trade sector companies, and how they are actually supporting, and whether or not they're consuming too many resources or providing enough resources back into the economy, right? So being able to understand those that connect the ecosystem. Are we going to do a multiplier effect analysis to?
Yeah, so the next steps, so staff is asking you today to recommend the inclusion of these industry clusters as priority industries in the economic development strategy for consideration in the future. But in the interim, we're going to develop the specific industry profiles, which identifies both the impact on the local economy, the trade deficit, the multiplier effect. We were with Visit Bend the other day, and so we brought the local hospitality impact versus the local and tied those together. So we are in the process of doing that. But for today, this is just based on the 5-6 criteria of how we identified those industry clusters, because we told you in February, after the target sector, you wanted to know the supply chain of the target sector, and this is part of that process. And then as we move forward, we may, refine these priority industries, because you might see, well, too much is being invested in this. But in some of the summaries in the industry cluster, you notice that a lot of these industries' demand is being met by local suppliers. So we know that it's having a direct positive economic benefit on the local economy.
Yeah. Well, last point thank you for bringing up the supply chain. Because one of the also things we were talking about is as we talk about the transportation fee, that the infrastructure is being stressed, right? But and as we start looking at like some of the numbers you have on here, for example, 85% of the industry's demand met by local suppliers. That demand, right, I just quoted, is from the furniture cluster. That infrastructure impact is going to be different than the infrastructure impact from the technology sector, right? Because the import, output, or export of those goods and services from a digital aspect doesn't necessarily require the same sort of infrastructure investment, right?
Correct.
So how will we be able to sort of put that in context?
So during the growth management plan update, which will begin later this year, early next year, they are going to use the industry cluster analysis and are going to break that down in terms of the projected employment. And then they'll also look at the acreage that is needed per employee for that over the next 20 years. And so that's really where we're going to get to the actual transportation and land impacts on these proposed industry clusters. We can do kind of high level of looking at the top employer of each industry cluster, the size of their location, the total employees, and do kind of a back of the napkin type of analysis to show. But this opens up opportunities for, if we do recruit retain or expand these businesses, that we focus on the areas in which are undeveloped, which Juniper Ridge, we have 200 acres of undeveloped industrial land. So it's about strategic placement of these businesses while also minimizing the transportation impact.
You've been on the healthcare where it fits, is it in one of these categories?
We knew we were going to get this question, and so we are going to answer it honestly. So healthcare is a local traded sector. So it's not, I'm not saying it's not important. It's one of our top generating GDPs of the community. However, the money that goes into the healthcare is from local residents. So it doesn't bring in new money unless they might happen to be in Redmond or Lapine or somewhere else. So while it's a largest sector employer, massive GDP impact, it doesn't bring in new money, but that doesn't mean it's not important. This analysis is just focused on those clusters that bring in new money and export their services out. It can be up to BDAP if you'd like us to include that in the priority industries. We just have to kind of do a little bit of analysis to show like what could the city and or community do in terms of supporting that.
Well, I'll explain my train of thought and then make a recommendation. So my thought is with helplessness, with our behavioral health crisis in the state of Oregon and all of the things that are impacting our general like communities, economies. There is when I said healthcare, I mean, you could think of like clinical, I'm sick, that type of thing, but you can also think about the long-term impact from the federal and state, which will eventually roll down into a city that's a pretty complex, like, component. But when we're talking about what does that look like, what will it be, who can live here, who can thrive here, I think there is a component of that that encompasses, you know, residential treatment or crisis or all of those other spectrums that are beyond just like health of, you know, in the general population.
So what I'm hearing is you're identifying social issues that are kind of outside the purview of economic development. And while economic development can incorporate a whole host and a whole wide variety of things, for this body and for this project, it's about how do we create living wage jobs in order to live here. There are a whole host of other things like educational quality, transportation, lifestyle amenities, and healthcare. But if we start down that path, it's going to be mission creep, right? And it will be a plan that is convoluted in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, that doesn't negate maybe looking at that in the future as a one-off project within the economic development strategy. But for this particular, it's how do we recruit, retain, and expand businesses that bring in new money to the city, but also help provide living wage jobs to live and work here.
Appreciate that answer. I can be both of them.
Yeah.
I failed to mention, we added, our mayor recommended we add an ex officio seat for St. Charles specifically, and I know that's tangential to what you're describing, but Mike Richards is their VP of Business Development, and he's going to be serving in that ex officio seat for BDAD moving forward. And him and I have had this exact conversation, and it's very much on the same page. But as St. Charles undergoes their 50-year master planning process that they're just kicking off right now, and the level of investment that they're going to have in our community, I think to your point around, they're an essential partner that we want to be working in lockstep with. But I appreciate the
there's conflicting, I mean, where they want to grow and serve, but then there's also reimbursement. I mean, that's like a whole, but purely economic, I mean, I actually kind of appreciate that filter because it makes a lot simpler. And that's the
don't want to overcomplicate.
On the forestry and wood products piece, I mean, these sound like these are four obviously priority areas that are going to get maybe an outsized portion of the focus and resources as we get into the next, kind of phase of city operations here. But can you talk a little bit about this? I mean, obviously the projected employment figures aren't promising in this sector. What is the mindset about making this an area of focus? Is it to try and reverse that course, or is it that it's that location quotient is so high? What is it?
So if you'll, so if you'll go back to keep going. Oh, no, go back. That. So in the analysis, you'll also see that the location quotient is still high. It's above 2.10 or 2.04. That means even though that we are losing employment, it's still going to be a competitive industry cluster. The reason that we did this and it dropped the location quotient below the 1.10, that might be like triage, right? Cut our losses for the next 10 years. However, timber track operations are pretty large here. We do have businesses in the region, not only in Bend, but also Redmond, that uses hard timber and wood products as manufacturing. And then maybe in the strategy and or policy, both at a local and state advocacy level, how do we shore up and support those type of businesses, whether it's long-term stability for the cluster or reoriented training and or facility conversion. And so we still feel it's a very important cluster. I mean, it's one of the top GDP producing because we export all that product out of the region. But that's also a policy conversation that we can have with BDAD. Is this a priority industry? And if the projected population decrease of 13%, but if you look, we're only losing 28 employees for furniture and then 212 for forestry and wood products, but it will still remain as a large wood employment in the area.
Yeah, I interpret that as either the industry has gotten more sophisticated and capable of doing more with less people, or the industry itself is, in a state of decline, and therefore it's not a growth pathway for the region. So I'm just trying to understand, with this prioritization, does that create new motivation to kind of reinvent that industry, to give it new life, to change that trajectory, or is that part of that resource? I mean, the piece here is about living wage employment within the region. So I'm just curious how that creates maybe new motivation for those businesses to try and kind of reinvent themselves for the reality of the next 10 years. Yeah.
And in the analysis, you'll notice we have that labor profile of each industry cluster. So the one thing that we did not factor into this analysis at any level, because it's just such a new field of what we don't know what's going to happen, is AI. So not only is AI going to influence a lot of these industry clusters, but also the conversion of the actual manufacturing of the product, like with Ford and the automotive, who went almost entirely autonomous. We're seeing the same thing for other manufacturing institutions. So you plug in a little computer and it builds you a chair, right, out of wood. And so in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot of labor disruptions. And at this point, we don't know exactly how to mitigate that.
So one of the things we see here about business services is that it's growth in the Bend area is going to be abnormal to the projected growth for the U.S. And we get tourism, right? We get tourism, but for business services, have you guys had focus groups or stakeholder groups with business service owners?
No, we haven't had. So we haven't had any focus groups with any of these industry clusters. This is purely data, identifying the stuff. One of the key objectives that have been preliminarily identified in the proposed draft version 1 non-public economic development survey is setting up industry cluster councils to talk about the challenges affecting not only you, but your future industry, employment. So we're on the same wavelength. It's just at this time, it's purely data.
In that business.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up for you. It's everything that was listed in your target sector that you saw earlier this year. Banks, corporate headquarters, realtors, auditors, anything that services the function of an industry cluster. So even though business services is its own industry cluster, oftentimes it services other industries. So for example, in the tourism and hospitality cluster, you have auditors, financial planners, bankers, corporate headquarters that serve that cluster. So
Yeah.
it has a lot because the employment's pretty large too.
So you said earlier that these successive clusters are for industries that are macroeconomic, right? Is that right?
Say that one more time.
So
Lillian.
these industry clusters are for business clusters that are for macroeconomic base, is that right? Right, did I sound it correct? Meaning that they.
Yeah, so traded sector is basically you hire a workforce, you produce a product, you meet the local need first, and then the remaining portion is sold or exported out of the region. And then it brings those service or that new revenue back in. So they can either reinvest that new revenue into their business operations by expanding the product and or hiring or paying better.
Right, so when we talk about business services in this scale, these are businesses that providing services that are going to support industries outside of that, is that right?
No, right now, the industry cluster is below 1, so they're still primarily servicing the local economy.
Got it.
What do you think above 1? So.
Yeah.
Renee, you learned about location quotients 20.
So
Yeah, this is a whole lot of information and very understandable of the inquiries and appreciate the conversation. We feel like we're at a point to get to a recommended motion.
That's just to use this data to inform future decisions.
Correct.
I have a couple quick questions. Can you, just at a high level, explain why construction services is in the transforming quadrant?
yeah, I'll pull that up right now.
Very loud.
Do that.
So the reason is because it has a location quotient of 0.3. That means it's a very locally specialized local cluster. And 2, the differential shift is negative 10%. Looking at, so in 2019, the total employees in this cluster was 114 with 13 establishments. In 2023, it was 103. That just means it's not growing as quickly as the national average. So it's a very specialized cluster. Doesn't mean it's not important because we need housing and we need new buildings, but it's not exporting its goods and services.
A lot of the stakeholder interviews I've had with that industry in particular, prominent presence in the community, but tops out at like 20 employees. And so just in terms of firm size, that has been a recurring theme that I've noticed.
I imagine there's more competition coming in too from outside.
A lot of businesses aren't headquartered here, they just have satellite offices here, so.
And here's the big disclaimer of the construction services industry. We're using data that has unemployment identification numbers from the state based on the total employees that they pay unemployment insurance on. Some of these firms and clusters use 1099s, which is not necessarily within that same purview. And so construction services or construction firms often do use 1099 or subcontractor laborers, which would not necessarily be reflected, but we're pretty confident in this specialized exporting cluster.
And then last question, I promise, food and beverage in the maturing quadrant. What are some of the key factors for that?
Yep, I'm gonna pull that up for you. Okay. So the food and beverage is the reason it is a maturing cluster is it's still competitive and it's still growing, but it's growing at a much slower rate in the city of Bend than it is nationally. So we're not capitalizing on the actual national momentum of that industry cluster. So that means the competitive advantage is just not there.
Started here.
Do we know why? Data wise, no. Empirically, it could be they've lost the entire cluster has only lost 1 employee between 2019 and 2023, which is pretty good. But the national movement is growing. So it's just in that weird maturing, it could bounce back into an emerging. That's why we've included it, because it is a primary industry in the city of Bend.
Hey, I don't have this PowerPoint. I'm working off the PDF that we were sent.
Yep.
I think that this is a typo. I just want to like double check. That PDF. In one place I see, that we
What?
have 184 information technology employers. In other places it says we have 10. It's just such a massive difference that I'm just hoping you could clarify what the real number of like businesses generating those 1,200 IT jobs are.
So ask that question one more time and I'll pull up.
And I apologize, all I have is what we were sent.
No, yeah, that's great.
And then the PDF that we were sent on page 9 is the first, like, here's your clusters and here's the number of businesses and here's the number of jobs.
Mhm.
It says that there's 1,200 IT jobs supplied, at 184 establishments.
Mhm.
And 2 pages later on page 11, it becomes 1,200 jobs at 10 establishments.
Yeah, the 10 establishes is not correct. That is a typo.
It's not, so is it 180 or is it 10?
It's 184.
So
Yep.
there's 184 companies here doing software development or similar.
Something, yes.
Okay, that's a huge difference than 10.
Glad you caught that, because this is a draft. This is a draft.
They both seem kind of unbelievable to me. Like one seemed way too big, one seemed way too small, but okay, great. 184. And this is not a remote. These are like locally headquartered.
UI is paid to the state of Oregon.
Okay. Cool.
A lot of those firms could be one employee.
Could be. Well, yeah, and again, that's why I keep going back to like remote thing or. Okay.
How does information technology fit into these 4 clusters? Is that?
It's under the
First one.
advanced sciences and manufacturing. Just to let you know, of the 1,280, roughly half are software publishers.
Yeah,
And-
that's what I sort of figured.
But then the semiconductor manufacturing is only 147. So the true manufacturing is a total of 588, and then software publishers is 630.
And that's not making like a biotech product or a furniture product or a forestry and wood product or a food and beverage product. Like, I'm just going back to the Nosler and and I know I'm not supposed to talk about specific employers, but like, you're making something else. Where are you in this pile? Are you in the pile if you're an advanced manufacturer who is a traded sector business that you don't fall neatly into?
So
It's not aerospace disappeared, obviously, from the top side. Think about the airplanes, right? And there's quite a few people who work.
yeah, so we can sit down and talk about specific numbers, but the overall thing is how a firm files out their form using the NACIS code that they use. And here's another caveat, the disclaimer: they can choose NACIS codes differently every year, and it happens. It's what was in your target sector disclaimer at the very end of the citation and methodology. So they get to claim their NACIS code. 2, we use the NACIS codes as prescribed by how most people use the cluster definitions. And remember, it's a theory. It's a cluster theory. It's not settled science, and it's not always going to be the same in 2019 as it is in 2023. And NACIS updated their codes in 2022. It's not the same thing as it was in 2019. So we're always aiming at a moving mark when it comes to data, but
What this board or what the city council could do is say, I want aerospace to be leading.
I guess I'm just wondering where like other manufacturers are, because just by definition, they are trades.
so if you look at your target sector, manufacturing itself accounted for 6%, and that's the 2-digit NACIS code for the entire employment in the city of Bend. And when we delve down further into those cluster definitions, it breaks it out to upstream metal, chemical manufacturing, anything manufacturing, and also manufacturing on the NACIS code of the 2-digit includes food and beverage. So we're breaking it down because there's going to only be 3 of us right now that's going to be in the economic development department come January, I'm sure, and with limited resources. And so what staff is trying to present to you is we can't be everything to everyone, and we don't have enough resources to do everything. So we as a city have to be a little bit more strategic in the next 10 years until we actually have the capacity to really invest in the overall development of the economy. But we'll do those industry profiles. We'll get you more information. But for now, all we're asking is, are these the priority industries that you would like us to include in the economic development strategy? But that doesn't preclude us in 2-5 years to update this as see fit.
And would the economic development strategic plan only focus on these clusters?
No, but it would give priority to them because remember, we're limited staff and limited resources, but that does not preclude us from recruiting a manufacturing that might have 100 jobs or pay better wages that might not be in these, or healthcare, right? But exporting products and services, bringing in new money is the kind of the goal.
You'll see the specific verbiage or priority is included in. I just want to make sure that's cool.
I'm ready to make a motion if we're good.
One point, so you raised a point earlier that about the roadmap.
Mhm.
Is it possible that as we approve this, that we get supplied with that roadmap, just so that we all are clear about where we're headed and when we're making progress on that?
And you're talking about the roadmap of using the 3 documents in order to make the overall decision of investments.
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be the strategy. But yeah, we can start providing you the framework ahead of time on that. Yeah.
Modify this, or my recommendation would be to modify it slightly as, instead of saying like as priority industries, like this is all that it will ever be, say that these, I mean, I acknowledge that the data supports these, but there may be other objectives that come out of it that we want to recommend are the said priorities. So saying like to approve the proposed industry cluster or to utilize the data that supports these industry clusters, something to that effect.
You can make any amendment you'd like.
Yeah, what would be like, say more about like what you're hoping we would, or we might do later.
Basically, once we get the other 2 reports and then we collectively have a conversation based on business feedback or city council goals that we may, because this is substantiating what's already here. And maybe what we want in the next 20 years is something that isn't here yet. So we would want to have the ability to plan and make the whatever's developed something that's more strategic versus, yeah, keep doing what's happening organically, just substantiating.
That's kind of where my question was coming from, because I would imagine we want to have a vision, cities on board and, you know, so this is great, I think, foundational information. But I could see it, you know, including something else. Do you want to speak up then? Yeah.
Just put in as initial priority industries.
There.
Some kind of clarity.
And, you know, Brianna, you've been bringing up some good points. So the service sector isn't something we ignore, right? So healthcare is actually a growing traded sector, believe it or not, because we're now attracting folks from outside the Bend area to Bend facilities. So there'll be a lot of changes in the next few years over that, but will it put it over the data point to be in the top 4? Don't know. Do we ignore it and not do anything about it or include it in the overall economic development plan? Of course not, because there are other factors that are going to go into the overall department and how we focus on things. Healthcare is probably going to be one of the fastest growing services. It has to be based on what's happening to our population. We're also going to be looking at how do we support the work inside the urban renewal areas. They're not all going to be within this traded sector. The top 4. Some might be outside of it, but if there's an intersecting interest of, oh, we're going to build a housing and a mixed use that has XYZ on the bottom floor. You see, it's much more complicated than saying we will focus on these 4 sectors. But what it does do is it helps us focus some of the energy when we're actually out recruiting. and we're talking to folks that we want to bring in, and you look at your list of criteria, what's going to bring the most benefit by generating traded sector activity, bringing other people's money into our community, that's where this is really going to help us focus. Does that help?
But I think what you're saying really is at the beginning, Cyrus, you said today's goal is to have us decide whether or not we want to include this in a broader scope. And I think you guys are saying let's include it in a broader scope, not the only scope and the only set of priorities based on just this one document.
But what you are doing, as I see this, is recommending that these are the 4 identified highest focus, highest productivity traded sector data sets. And these are our focus. That's what we're saying here is what we want to focus on. Yeah.
Like I can are currently Bend, but is that what we want in Bend in 20 years?
And that's why we don't say done. We monitor. One of the things I think that this group should do over the next few years is really take a serious look at what's happening with automation and AI. It is happening way faster than I thought it was going to. And I think that certain data sets like that, as we go over time and put that a layover over our traded sector and our focus areas, I think is a healthy practice to do. What is changing? How many of these jobs that we've been counting as a growth all of a sudden become obsolete? If we're not monitoring stuff like this over time, then we're not doing our job. We need to be ready to be dynamic moving forward. But what Jonathan has done, and this data is 2023, maybe 2024 if you're lucky. It is a look backwards, to Dwayne's point. And it's always going to be that way. So we're going to have to balance those 2 things.
Yeah, which I totally understand. I think also looking at, I think it was the transportation plan, that strategic plan that was developed 10 or 20 years. And then it was like, well, if there was more foresight to what Bend wanted to be, we could have mitigated and prioritized those projects in a lot better way that would have benefited the overall community. And what I'm saying is, let's be forward thinking in how we recommend these things and not just look at what's happened. And so as long as so I think that's where, I
think what I at least envision this strategy is like an and on top of that. So drawing a line in the sand of saying, these are the things we know we do well, and we want to show how that is, but not closing the door to future opportunities or future things that maybe haven't historically came to Bend or done well in Bend. And so having the ability to evolve, I think, is certainly going to be a portion of the plan, but really clearly and explicitly articulating what we do well and here's why. I think, to Katie's point around recruitment, that gives us a little more legitimacy.
Yeah. And I hear that you're like, that's what you're going to do, but I think for somebody that's then not sitting at this table in 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is, we have a statement that actually says this was the intent. Because there's no way to connect those dots. I mean, that was one of the hardest things joining this board was like, well, somebody 5 years ago decided that this is what plan you were gonna like carry through. And it was like, okay, well, what if we don't agree with that anymore?
And that's the thing is you can scrap that plan and do a new one. I mean, that's a purview of every future elected and advisory body. So you take a chance on that. But what we're trying to do here is there's only so many dollars in the pot. And there's only going to be so many dollars over the next 5 years. And by data, this is what you'll get your biggest bang out of the buck. To Katie's point, there are other areas that we'll have to focus on in terms of like local sector services, retail services, healthcare services, maybe services that haven't even been identified yet, as to your point, what's going to happen in the next 10 years. But at least for right now, this is where we get our money. And if we're only going to have a strategy for the next 10 years, is it good to prioritize these clusters? Or should we be more aspirational and maybe be successful in another area or not? I was showing these 2 earlier today, and we'll get into this later down the road, but heat map of where 2-lane and 4 lanes are coming into Bend. Because that is a primary issue, is the transportation network in and out of Bend for product movement. It's not good. And so if these industry clusters are surviving in Bend, if these industry clusters are surviving in Bend with the current infrastructure, that might be a good way to start being more methodical, but you can amend it however you want.
So sorry, we're like totally eating it. But I have to go back one more time to the forestry and wood products, outdoor, you showed us a great chart, and these were all in red, and it was all shrinking by 30% over the next 10 years. Wages are shrinking, number of establishments are shrinking. Like, why does it rise to this target one more time? And I know you're like, oh, because there's still a lot of people. It's like,
And the location quotient is still there, right? It's still, yep.
But I mean, that. Will it be?
We can delay this if you'd like, and because we have a SWAT that we might have like 8 minutes.
Like, oh, like no more stuff. Like I look at a list of traded sector businesses, not all of which involve moving a lot of stuff in trucks.
Right.
These do,
Mhm.
But there's a whole bunch of things on this list. Tourism, of course, creative industries, IT, that involve moving nothing on anything.
Now, it could be the purview of this board to focus solely on emerging clusters. I mean, a lot of communities do that, where these are clearly working on themselves. They're nationally competitive. They've done that themselves. But what we're hearing from our focus groups is you haven't provided the support for existing businesses in the city of Bend. So like, how do we thread that needle? But then the creatives, business services, and knowledge, and we want to support OSU Cascades Innovation District. There's those things, but like Katie was saying, this is not the end all be all. It's just where the dollar should be invested first if the opportunity is there. And who knows?
I think the challenge, and we've done this a lot, where the data, we're sort of prematurely making this decision, thinking we've got supporting data today for this, but the point has been made several times about we're propping up an industry that's dying, right? Potentially in the wood products, and I mean that's what your numbers are kind of indicating that. So, for those dollars spent and the energy spent on that forest and wood products industry today, is there another industry that it is emerging and going to be the future of Bend in 10 to 15 to 20 years down the road? And I'm not saying, I would say, let's move and improve this today and get this done. But I think what's been brought up is really just to keep our eyes open for other opportunities and potentially in place of something that gets you a great return, right? And I don't think you're excluding that conversation.
No.
Yeah.
In the 5x2 strategy, that's part of every biennium, there's 5 objectives that you implement of the strategic plan. That's also the opportunity to always continue to look at these industry cluster councils and feedback, because you may hear something that is a red flag of like, we need to prioritize something else. So this is not the end all be all, but it's where the data is at today.
Yeah. So when we have an opportunity, given the staff, partnerships and all that, when we have the opportunity to refresh the data,
we will not be able to refresh the data until January of 2026.
Cool. And so perhaps we just look forward to, that opportunity and include a motion right now that says, look forward to refreshing the data. Because I think the point has been made is that you don't want to get in the vehicle and hit out a single road without having the ability to pivot, make changes at some point when you get better data. And you have agreed that the data, and you've done a great job so far of maturing the data set. And so perhaps it's a great idea to, thank you.
So when you see the outline, when we start to actually put the straw person together of what this economic development strategy looks like, it takes in data. It's going to take in some other aspects of what are essential business services and community services. It'll take in urban renewal, considerations into it. Placemaking, community making that goes along with urban renewal is a key part of economic development. There are many, many other aspects of it. And so that is harder to get data on. because that is driven by us. That is, what does our community need? Where are the places it can happen that are essential public services or businesses, and also essential to public economic development, placemaking. Those are different aspects of this that we're going to be talking about quite a bit. And I think that when you look at the outline and you look at prioritizing, again, to separate what types of industry sectors, and I hear you, Jen, as far as where are we going with this forestry stuff. I think that's going to be something we're going to have to monitor over time. I think Willie might have a different opinion. We're talking about you, Willie, and where we want to go with supporting the cabinetry and doors and construction related wood products, et cetera, over time. But I think that what we can do is start with this as some sector clusters that we want to focus on for the aspect of recruiting. Hopefully that has the overlap with citing it in places that make sense for us. I think over time, also, I'm just painting a bigger picture here because I'm sensing we kind of need it. Over time, that also blends in with where are our infrastructure priorities that align with commercial and industrial growth specifically. And to Jonathan's point, it could be one of them is a transportation infrastructure. It might be a port authority or another way to cluster industrial development and value add to it over time. There'll be a lot of strategies that are much bigger depending on what way we want to go. Some of the factors that I look at when I see Bend is some limitations on how much industrial property we have, limitations really on commercial property to some degree. The size of the industry sectors that are here, when you look at information technology, for example, they're tiny compared to other places. We have some nuances that are really unique to Bend, and we'll be blending that into this strategy as we move forward. So that'll add to this discussion of what areas are we prioritizing right now. There's a lot more to it.
I guess, does anybody on the board have an industry that you think we should? You mean a new industry? Yeah, or like that isn't here, or it's too small, that should be incentivized to have more of.
What I'm kind of hearing is some of us are getting hung up on the forestry and wood products sector. I think the other three are pretty comparable. I think we can all agree those are factors that we need to focus on. The advanced sciences and manufacturing might be a little big. From my personal thought, I mean, there's manufacturing, and I'm thinking like technology and those kind of things. There's kind of, it's almost like, yeah, those are almost two different arms to really focus on from a recruitment standpoint. But I'm new, so sorry, I'm new to this whole thing.
That was the funny you mentioned it. We all debated that this morning of how to define that cluster because we don't. It's just biotech and information technology, right? But within the information technologies, there's semiconductor manufacturing. It's not the typical manufacturing you think of.
And then there's just a lot of other technology, like you said, software development, those kind of things that it's kind of separate from manufacturing, but there's a lot of high tech paying jobs too. That could be an attractive movement to bring to Bend, right? So how
about so let me because we need to do a SWOT analysis for 30 minutes, but is there, okay, so clearly we're not in a position to recommend the industry clusters today. What more information do you need from staff in order to make an industry priority determination for the next 5 to 10 years? Because I'm hearing.
I actually think the most interesting idea that you pitched was to focus on everything but these four. Did he say that? He said you could recommend to
Yes, I did.
a strategy that is everything else. If these are functioning in here because of Bend and what it is, why not leverage what we think Bend could be?
One of the things that I hear you, and one of the things That's really important to keep in mind when you look at clusters. That is what generates 1, 2, 5, 20 begets 1, 2, 5, 20, right? That's the whole theory behind cluster development, is that if you have gravity, it builds and then it gets more diverse off of that. And so that's a go, recruit, bring, make bigger. To do emerging industries is a different thing. It's to start from scratch. It's harder.
And I do, I mean.
Real quick, can we let Dawn speak
And
to?
that's fine. While you're coming up, I would just say that, I mean, I think our industry lacks diversity. And I think about hiring for a lot of people, and there's not family, because there isn't enough of that, and if you want to go lazy. So if there's only so many in these buckets, how do we get more diversity out of the economy?
You got the question for me?
No, I just wanted you to talk about, like, in your industry, how do you approach industry clusters?
Well, you can tell I have like a couple pens full of ink on here. I'd say that the whole NAICS code approach sounds like a really good idea because it's specific and detailed. But for the two of the issues you mentioned, that they can change, they can be whatever they want. You can self-select, sort of degrades the quality of that. But that's all you got. So I think that's why you got to do it. One thing I struggle about, we had an industry sector analysis we did last year, and this isn't it's the same subject, but it's different language. And I'd like to see a bridge of how that would help me understand what we decided on the past. But to answer to get to your question slowly, like in bioscience is just one example. There's 54 companies, I think, listed. 57 companies listed. And when we all talk about the word bioscience, we all have a picture of it, but there's not 57 of those companies that you come to think about. So what are those companies? And so the incentives to a Saran versus a consulting practice that focuses on bioscience, which is probably in that 57, is completely different. So the way I would look at it is how is the revenue formed by those companies? Even though they called bioscience, what they do for a living is completely different. So that'd be one comment I would have. The comment you made about let's try everything else. I'm not sure if you're serious about it, but I'd say we then lose all the benefits of what we do well here. And I think looking at the forward, like for instance, one of the companies on the graph, like food and beverage, that one I'm certain is almost all completely dominated by the craft brewing, which is not in a good place. Right. So I think that label doesn't articulate those companies that make coffee, toffee, kombucha, nuts, and so on. That maybe that's what we're talking about because that's emerging and it's right here and we're good at it. But we have it in the craft brewing category, and I think that it makes our approach awkward. And that's not a criticism of the process. That's a criticism of what's real life, and we have to sort through. And I'm glad I don't have to do it. I just get to react to the companies that need it or need guidance or whatever. So that's a couple of comments I have. I think you've been asked to really absorb a responsibility in making a decision on a very short time frame on 66 pages of detail. And those back pages are really valuable. The summary that you have on the back page, those are really, really insightful about what's trade sector or where they get. So I guess you asked me for an opinion, you got more than you asked for, but I'd say it'd be difficult for you to respond as asked on the time frame you had on the degree of quality here.
Consequences if we move this to the next BDAB meeting for you guys.
All right. So where we're at in this, bear in mind, I jumped in the middle of this thing and I'm just hanging on for dear life, trying to follow the work that these guys have been doing. So as far as what the next steps look like is we continue to vet this. We start to put the straw thing together, the template together. We get all the data. We're going to be briefing the mayor soon on just progress that we've made with the stakeholder interviews and the rest of the aspects of the plan. I think that by September, we really need to know what does the bulk of this look like? What is the direction we're going in? What is the intent and the outcomes that we're expecting? And Jonathan went over a bunch of those. October 15th, we go in front of council for a work session on progress. That's our hard date that we have to make. If you want to talk about this and contemplate the numbers and also maybe just have different and further discussion about where we're going and maybe some more context, we could do that next time if you want.
I would add that you can't stop moving. You got to keep pushing.
Yes.
And so I would think the input that the city staff has here about what this has and what it doesn't have is communicated, and I think they can move forward and polish that in a way that's more acceptable to BDAB. But whether that requires a signature and approval or whatever, I would recommend not putting a slowing of the process.
Yeah, I think from staff's perspective, you've seen the plan and the outline of the timeline since we first started this. And if there is going to be a delay, it would just be great to hear, is there going to be a change of thought, or what do you need to have a more informed decision between now and then, just to make sure there's a really specific reasoning of why we're delaying. Because if we're not at a point and we feel like we can't make a vote, and it doesn't have to be 9-0, vote the way that you see fit, but if we are going to delay, I think we just want to make sure that that's why.
I'm gonna say they're a month ahead of schedule.
I think assuming that that's what's going to be approved.
The timeline, but like he was saying, we have a hard date, and you all adopted the framework in March. December 3rd is when it's going to council for official adoption. So like Cyrus is saying, this isn't the end all be all of a strategic plan, but at a certain point, we're going to have to make some decisions and move on to the next step.
What's the difference between saying that we move to incorporate all of this great data that you've given us and done here into determining those priorities without setting what those priorities, that we approve these priorities based on this data, based on this one set of data? Because as you brought up, we saw the consultant report in January, and there's other stuff, two other documents you have coming to us, so maybe those also influence what the priorities are. But I would think, I certainly would be comfortable saying, do we want to incorporate this into our goal? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I could get on board with that of saying that today, because I think when you asked about what other data do you need, I think that's consistently how information is presented. It's like, here's this one set of data, and if you listen only to what we're saying, the answer is a really easy yes. But then we're not looking or talking about all the other pieces, and so I don't really feel informed about just jumping on board. And then, 6 months from now, people are going, why'd you approve that? And why didn't you do this? And it's like, well, it's the only data I had, which doesn't feel like then I'm doing a proper job sitting here. So either giving us enough time to go back and now figure out that data, if that's what we need to do, or to present the other side of the coin of what isn't being stated or supported in this data.
In any business group entity, you do have to make the best decision with the best available data you have to you, right? And I think in some ways, what Jonathan and team have done is to be able to provide us with that. And now you're a victim of your own success, because what you've led us to understand is that the data is emerging and it's getting better. And so locking into a single direction seems problematic when we know that those capabilities are continually developing, right? Which is why I think we wanted to understand where we're headed with the data aggregation and the build of the data, so that we can get some comfort that we're making decisions that are aligned whereas the capabilities grow. And so again, perhaps it's best to get comfortable with making a decision with the best data we have available at this moment, with an understanding that you're going to continue to evolve and build those capabilities, so that we don't get locked into having you guys focus on a road that's taking us to nowhere, but that we are able to pivot and make better decisions as the data does evolve. So I don't know if January 2026 is well, actually, that's the thing, but it's not too far. It's not too far. Yeah, that may be a good thing.
Say too, like, I think part of why this, because we just did it, I don't know, it feels like we just did a target sector presentation 10 minutes ago, and of course it's not, it was. Oh, and it overlaps with this really super well, except when it doesn't, right? Like, it encourages us to focus on healthcare and construction, and then, so maybe what this is just missing is traded sector. Does that make people feel more comfortable that like this is what we're talking about when we're talking about, traded sector economic development as opposed to economic development globally in the city of Bend?
So proposed traded sector industry cluster, is that what you're?
Priority traded sector industries for the economic development strategic plan.
For now, yes.
Yeah.
And they're just called priority.
I agree with you.
I like the word priority. It's like,
Instead of all of those? Or?
no, like you say, I moved to approve the proposed industry clusters of as priority traded sector industries for the economic development strategic plan.
Yeah.
With the commitment to revisit the data in January 2026. Oh, when did that just show up in the last? It's over here. Here, it says that.
So to that point, Brad, what she's saying is that she's talking about again the macro industries that are bringing in and having the team between now and then you got to decide on the consulting group to come in and so forth. So is this good enough to allow them to get started with those macro impact industries?
I think this is good for what the information that's been presented, and I'm not hearing in any way that we're not going to continue to look at this in the future. This is a starting point to get everything kind of rolling, and there's been acknowledgement already that we're going to continue to relook at as needed. The data is going to be new data is going to be available in whatever that is, 8 months. So I'm in favor of just rolling with this recommended motion. And let's just put it to vote. Can we get a motion to do this and see what we have at the table here?
I move to approve the proposed industry clusters of advanced sciences and manufacturing, outdoor lifestyles and products, craft beverages and forestry and wood products as priority trade industries for the economic development strategy plan with a commitment to revisit the data in January 2026.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay. With indifference. Yeah. Was there anyone online who needed to vote? Sorry, I'm not tracking.
We did not have any voting members online, just as officials.
You say the vote for the minutes?
Yes. Do you want me to say that?
Either the names or the numbers, just so the minutes can capture it.
Yeah, we had Mark, yes, Dwayne, yes, John, yes, Jen, yes, Chad, yes, Jillian, nay. Abstain for Brianna, yes for Gary. All right. Katie, floor is yours.
Well.
Great.
Do you have this in front of you and something that you can read? Great. So this is going to be super fun. So this part is informed by data and it's informed by the stakeholder outreach, that the real tactical Q&A sessions that Cyrus and I and others have been having, some of the work the chamber has done, EDCO has done, really trying to distill, and this is just a beginning. I always find it easier to start with something and edit it rather than start from scratch. And we don't have to end this today, but wanted to talk about, and Brianna, this kind of gets to some of the things you were talking about as well, the bigger context of the economy. What do we have going for us? Strengths, weaknesses, what's not so great, opportunities that we can take advantage of, and threats that may or may not be within our control. So we started this list, and it's probably, let's just start with the strengths and go from there, see how far we get until 2 o'clock and keep going. So strengths are for our, for Ben specifically, our region is the education institutions. We're talking about OSU Cascades, we're talking about COCC, K through 12. We have all the way up to now a doctorate program. You can go into kindergarten and you can stay in this community with a higher ed degree. That's essentially what that means. Quality of life, don't need to spend time on that. Small business ecosystem. Guess that's a strength. Sometimes we want it to be a more mid-size and up, but this is what we got, folks, and there are opportunities there. Wage growth has occurred over the last few years. Employment growth has occurred. Net business formation, according to Jonathan's data, is still on the positive. We are bringing in more than we are losing in our community, more businesses. Population growth, civic amenities, airports, rail. What else? What are we missing from our strengths? Anything come to mind?
MLI rail, it was right.
Yeah, I saw that, and the rail here isn't great, but we do have a BNSF line that feeds into the Class 1 railway main line into Portland area. It can go up to Seattle, it can go down to Long Beach. We have rail. Not every community has one, and especially when we don't have 4-lane highways that connect us north, south, east, west. It's pretty important. Not that many folks actually use the rail line here. There are a few spurs that are used, but it is a strength.
Good. I was just gonna say River Mountain, is that in quality of life or should those be separate things as far?
I kind of put them in quality of life, but this is up to you if you
I
think
think
it
that
needs.
the use of them, what about the fact that we have resources from?
So COICC,
Mhm.
COIC actually
Mhm.
listed the strength as natural resources and environment, which I think is appropriate.
Okay. Cyrus and I are jointly keeping notes on this. Okay.
Just for my benefit, can you tell me what is this being used for?
Sure. It is being used for
So,
strategies.
Yeah.
okay.
Basically for the plan.
Okay.
When we look at your strategies need to reflect where your strengths are and your weaknesses are. And so we'll formulate a list of those. And Jonathan referred to it, the 5x2. Thank you.
Okay.
2x4, 5x2.
That's been a strategy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's just a basic exercise. Yeah.
One strength that I believe our community has that others don't is a collaborative
Mhm.
culture.
Yep.
I remember talking to a business owner here that tried to replicate what they were doing as a community in California,
Yeah,
and no one would participate.
totally agree. Yeah.
Should she put bend and nice?
Well, actually, again, COIC has culture of business collaboration and entrepreneurial mindset.
There's something about the upskilling of our population along with its growth. Like, we have the people who are moving here. Like, again, I keep coming back to the remote worker number that we shared last time we were here. And the remote worker job does tend to be at a higher education level, higher wage level than.
So how would you phrase that?
Well, we have population growth, but it's maybe a skill growth. Upskilling, I don't know, you guys are you know those words. I'm just I'm not a professional economic developer.
Yeah, in the
Like influx of talent.
Sure, I love that.
yeah. Not necessarily working for us, but here.
No, but working here.
Yes.
And generating payroll taxes here.
Which is a strength and it's an opportunity. I would argue it's also an opportunity. Yeah.
Recent share of both commuters and.
Yeah.
Linkage.
Yep.
And interesting.
Yeah, they might be economic leakage, but they're not necessarily like tax leakage when they are, future workforce, labor pool for us and.
Okay.
Pros and cons. Are they an opportunity, maybe, not a strength?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
Yeah.
both.
Okay.
Yeah. What else in strengths? All right, weaknesses, rapid growth. It's hard to keep up and pay for it. Housing affordability, energy costs, and near-term capacity limitations that we're experiencing. Cost of living, regulatory environment. Limited interstate transportation systems, land, oh, it's not limited land costs, it's limited land for development.
Yeah.
And then high land costs. No local or state economic development funding necessarily, not a lot of incentivization in the state of Oregon. In other words, community remoteness, we're still not on the I-5 corridor. More people commute into Bend to work, straining transportation systems. What is it, 57 or 54? 54% come into Bend to go to work, and childcare costs and availability. That's what we started with. What are our other weaknesses?
Can I ask a question of weaknesses in compared to cities the same size in Oregon, cities the same size on the West Coast, cities the same size in the United States?
Yeah, I think cities is, yes.
Okay.
Because when we're trying particularly to recruit somebody from outside the Pacific Northwest, the state is more of a deterrent than the Bend is, I would say. So, yeah.
Can you explain the near-term capacity limitations?
For energy?
Yeah.
So we have enough energy, according to our electrical friends, to address the planned growth. But if something big should happen here, if new policies that are installed to do things, it really burdens the existing capacity and what the near-term capacity is. And beyond that, Pacific has plans to supply more, but it's a 10-year runway. So when you're looking at the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they're barely making it for what it is we have planned already. So it influences what we can actually accomplish, what types of industries we can bring.
And there are projects within the city and the state that have tried to happen that have been stopped because they can't actually power the building.
And that, I guess, is another weakness, is it's just hard to cite new energy in the state. Yep, correct.
Rapid growth, I mean, most declining cities would love to see that as a strength.
Uh-huh.
If they could have growth in town, so.
Isn't that fun?
Seems like growth at minimum should, population growth as a strength or some
Yeah.
aspect of opportunity.
Yep. I put population growth on strength. It's both. It's totally both.
Is it because, a huge portion of people who live or do business here are worried about that rapid growth?
That's one way to look at it. I don't look at it that way necessarily. I'm looking at it through an economic lens. When I see rapid growth, it means there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to go in and we don't have the money to pay for it. Therefore, we're making sacrifices and prioritizing decision-making that isn't going to cover all of our needs. We're going to have to prioritize because we have too many people coming in too fast. And so you have to make choices.
Elsewhere in the, you know what I mean? Like I wonder if it's captured in all the other things.
Yeah.
Because it is growing. Houses are too expensive. We don't have enough energy. We can't build enough roads.
I'm not even sure how to ask this question. Are internet capabilities a weakness because we don't have redundancy?
I haven't heard that. In fact, I was talking with Dawn about this the other day. I think that our internet situation is better within Bend proper. When you're talking rural on the outskirts in the whole MSA, which is now Tri-County, yeah, we have some shortfalls.
COIT has a broadband action team
Yeah.
for rural communities within Central Oregon, and that's more of a primary focus for an intergovernmental agency like that. But in Bend, I think he's
Yeah.
correct.
But it brings up another set of that we'll get to at another time, is what does it mean to be part of the MSA and market oneself as an MSA and not just Bend? And that's something we'll talk about.
Weaknesses, I wonder if it's more like infrastructure. I mean, there's different ways that transportation is listed, but I wonder if it just goes under like a bucket of infrastructure for
public infrastructure.
How about rapid growth, impacts on public infrastructure? Okay,
Otherwise, I feel like the list pretty much captures what I would.
yep,
Come up with.
okay,
I would also add a business support and regional, business support. Even, again, CYC says this as well, that access to capital, permitting process, are all things that
mm-hmm,
impacted. And then
Yep.
I would also add, they included social services, equity, and economic resilience as well. Absolutely.
good one. Okay. Opportunities. We have core area development, our urban renewal lands, in other words. We do have some large tract land available. It's going to go fast. Target clusters are positioned for future growth. Example of that is bio, which is experiencing a lot of growth, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. OSU Innovation Hub is an opportunity to partner, build, and do something really exciting in the community. Future new economic development department here in the city, actually developing our own department and our own strategies, and putting some gravity behind it. Reducing economic imports. What's this mean, Jonathan?
The
The trade imbalance. So the opportunity to increase exported items in more traded sector as opposed to bringing stuff in. Increase near-term housing construction for 80 to 120% AMI. We're actually putting some things in the ground in the next few years. That's pretty exciting. Opportunities for innovation from AI and automation. That could also be in threats, which it is. But if we're ahead of game, and that's why I brought it up, I think it's an area we need to spend time with as a group in the future. Anything else? Opportunities?
I think we're committed to right now, which is the creation of an economic development area.
Is, I don't know how to put this in words, but just the strength of our regional partners too, right? Like the dependency on Redmond's growth and LaFine's growth and how that actually fosters the ability for Bend to grow because people can afford to live in other communities other than here, right? And I don't find those symmetries in those communities that we can bolster ourselves as well. I don't know how to
Regional collaboration.
Yeah,
I think that's an opportunity there.
I think there's more opportunity to collaborate with our regional partners, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, under strengths, there was collaborative culture. I think that's also an opportunity to.
Want to just touch on threats? Obviously, you can go do your thing that you do every day and let this sit on your brain and send us more input. Would really appreciate that. But for now, let's just take 2 seconds to go over the threats: increasing share of work and commuters and economic leakage out of Bend, affordability impacts on workforce recruitment, further regulatory burdens from local and state governments, growing housing shortage. Can we ever keep up? Can we ever catch up? Competition with more connected communities with similar natural amenities. And so that goes to your point, Mark, about what are they doing in Colorado and some of these other areas where they're really nice places to live and they figured some stuff out that we haven't, for example. I think we figured a lot out here, but there's much more work to do. Economic uncertainty, don't know what, enough said. Natural hazards and climate change, and then impacts of workforce and business models due to AI and automation.
I'm still waiting out about the presentation from John's presentation from last month about our demographic shifts. That we doubled the number of households here without children under age of 18, that our schools, like we're running out of kids, as far as I can tell, which feels like a threat to me, our future workforce. And then also you talked about economic inequality, and we didn't really dig into it last month, but you sort of showed the lines, like, hey, it's way worse here. like 50% worse here than it is in the rest of Oregon, I imagine that has ripple effects.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
the wage gaps that exist.
Yeah, economic and wage gaps. Yep. Anything else? We're at 2.
I did add economic leakage remote workforce to opportunity.
Opportunities. Those people have kids.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know what you guys did, says local and federal. I'm sorry, local and state, I'd add federal there as well, right?
For threats.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got one for, in fact, you can even tell those are words from this distance. It's
Exactly.
really impactful. Not.
All right, so please continue to think about this stuff. Go ahead and email Cyrus with any other thoughts. This will change over time too, but this, I think, sets the table for some discussions on strategies. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Very productive meeting, and welcome to the new folks again.